Alabama's one and only, Kay Ivey.
Poor Joe. Bless his heart.
Coming days. Republicans, meanwhile, accused the Biden administration of doing too little, too late.
He has no plan to deport the more than 1 million people who have active deportation orders in our country.
And some Democrats also voicing concerns. Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar joining Republicans and urging President Biden to check out the border.
Just showing up at the border would send a strong signal to the communities that he's there.
Even before Title 42 expires, Cuellar says there are about 50,000 people already at the border waiting to get in. And according to CNN, DHS is projecting that once the policy ends, about 9,000 to 14,000 migrants could try to get into the country illegally each day. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao.
Is now the leading cause of death for young adults ages 18 to 45. But unraveling this public health crisis is actually quite complex. And that's why the NBC San Diego team has been digging deeper to understand how and why this is happening in their own backyard. In their documentary Poison Pill, they show the dark sides of fentanyl use that most people don't see. Take a look.
Department E, Edward 2. Roommate appears to be not breathing, 30-year-old. 219 Yellow Sugar Mount, you guys cover?
We have been on standby to go on a call when Team 10 gets a call that there's been an overdose somewhere here in San Diego County. And I mean, honestly, we knew it wasn't a matter of if, but when, because these are happening so frequently. So this was the apartment that today this team responded to. They tested some drugs that they found in that apartment where the person has died, and it came up positive for fentanyl. The guy that leads this team says that they go on at least 250 calls like this every single month. This turned out to be one of them. And it became very real for us here when they brought down this person's body down those stairs right there, in the body bag. And at about the same time, a friend of the person who died showed up, and I can't tell you how intense this poor woman's cries were, you know, asking why and how, and this is happening so often. This is just one example.
Dreading December 21st, when Title 42 is set to end.
It's tough here. We have people coming through our ranch. Not every day, but we've had as many as 25 in a bunch here. And I've had to build a 6-foot fence around my house with spikes on it to keep people from coming to the front door.
And Mexican cartels are taking full advantage of the chaos.
There's been about 5 or 6 ranches along the border here close that have been bought by the cartels. And they stage loads out of there and stage people out of there and drugs out of there.
Well, the Biden administration's even admitting the moment Title 42 goes away, there could be 9,000 to 14,000 encounters per day at the border. That doesn't even include gotaways.
As the numbers continue to swell, the Biden administration has found a way to reduce those numbers, at least on paper. For example, these migrants are being routed into a little-known program designed to help people with special circumstances. Technically, it also reduces the numbers of illegal crossers because these are pre-approved before reaching the border, then transported into the U.S. at taxpayer expense.
Back in March, about 6 million people were forced to flee their homes here in Ukraine because of Russia's invasion, and about 44,000 of those people came to the United States under a special program called humanitarian parole. Now, that special program is specifically for people with urgent and temporary needs for asylum. But now it's being expanded by the Biden administration to include people from all over the world, even economic migrants.
This is an example of there's many programs of where they're abusing their parole authority. Listen, they're just trying to accommodate a mass flow of migration under the guise of legality.
Todd Bensman is a senior fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies.
Humanitarian parole is supposed to be given to, one person here, one person there on a case-by-case basis. It's very clear in the Immigration and Naturalization Act what that authority is for, somebody in really dire straits.
The Homeland Security website calls this program an advanced travel authorization and shows it started in late October. But this section specifically states that parole is generally not intended to be used to avoid normal refugee processing or to provide protection to individuals at generalized risk of harm around the world. According to Bensman, however, that's exactly how it's being applied.
And American nonprofits are down there in force helping these thousands of people very quickly get the paperwork that they need. But they're applying that to masses of people all at once. And in order to qualify for humanitarian parole, pretty much what you need to do is just give them a tale of woe of some kind, or say that you're gay, or say that you were living in an area where there was cartel shooting, and then the Mexicans will put them in federal buses, drive them to the nearest port of entry, and walk them across. You can't see it on the drones, and you can't see it in the statistics page.
Bensman saw this happening while researching his second book on illegal immigration. He found that once the migrants are in America, they are released to seek work, put their kids in school, and start new lives. Although unlike the Ukrainians who received humanitarian parole, most of these migrants have no plans to return home.
This is a de facto amnesty. This is de facto asylum. It's a de facto visa, de facto legal entry into America.
It's an IQ test to me. I can't believe that people don't see what's happening to this country. Man, they've got us shaking our heads and wondering what's going to happen,
Their idea is we don't want to stop, block, and deter. We want to make it smoother and easier and faster and safer so that more people will want to come.
It seems like the administration's not working for us. It's just like they're trying to tear this country apart.
Chuck Olton, CBN News, on the board.
Continuing trespasses and invasions of the United States' paramount sovereign property rights. Never mind the fact that millions of illegal aliens trespass across the land every day and night. Laura Reese is the Director of Border Security and Immigration at the Heritage Foundation. She tells NTD the government's trespassing argument and other points don't make sense to her. The lawsuit against Arizona was made on behalf of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Interior. It says by installing the containers, Arizona harmed the environment by cutting down trees and degrading habitat. Harming the environment? By putting up this wall, again, never mind the fact that millions of illegal aliens harm the environment when they cross illegally and leave behind tons of garbage and trash. NTD reached out to the DOJ but hasn't heard back yet. The Department of Homeland Security announced a plan to fill in the gaps around a year ago. Ducey's office says Arizona is ready to work with them on that. In the meantime, the governor's office reportedly plans to continue building the makeshift wall, telling the Daily Signal, when you look at the amount of fentanyl that's coming across the border and the fact that fentanyl overdoses are a leading cause of death among young people in some of our border counties, as well as a growing problem nationally, of course Governor Ducey is not going to sit by and do nothing. Reese says it's not just fentanyl coming in. This isn't going to end well for Americans. Particularly when we have 1 million gotaways. While we see other immigrants turn themselves in and be processed in, these gotaways do not want to be caught. They don't want their fingerprints taken. And we have to assume there are many convicted criminals among them and potentially known and suspected terrorists as well. The governor will leave office in less than a month, after which Democrat Katie Hobbs is set to take over. It's not clear yet what exactly she plans to do with the containers. Reporting by Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Americans, you all know the numbers. We can go through all the numbers. How about the text that I just got from a rancher in Texas? I'm getting seriously concerned about Title 42 ending. We've had 5 groups on us in the past 7 days. 6 groups if we count the last 10 days. 2 groups yesterday. It's like that on us where they've mostly been avoiding this place. It's a really bad sign. And no one, sheriff or DPS, is able to respond. What am I supposed to do? I can promise you Texans aren't going to put up with this anymore. And this body, this Congress, this Republican-led Congress needs to hold Alejandro Mayorkas accountable. He needs to be fired. He needs to be removed from office under the tools under the Constitution. These are lives that are at stake.
Look, I've been at this immigration enforcement since 1984. That's when I joined the Border Patrol. I climbed the ranks to be the first acting director of ICE that actually came up through the ranks. I have worked for 5 attorney generals. I have worked for 9 secretaries of Homeland Security. I have worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas is the first president and first cabinet official that came into office and unsecured a border. Stone cold fact. Every president I've worked for, even Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, took some steps to secure the border because they understood, as you just heard, you can't have national security without border security. Alejandro Mayorkas unsecured the most secure border we ever had. I don't care what your opinion is on illegal immigration. When you create a crisis this big, that takes 70 to 80% of agents off the line, it creates a national security crisis. Border Patrol's arrested people from 161 countries. Many of these countries are sponsors of terrorism. They've arrested 116 of them, trying to sneak in the country. There's over 1 million recorded gotaways. If you don't think a single one of those 1 million people gotaways came here to do us harm, came from a country that sponsors terrorism, then you're a fool. What's happening on the border right now is the biggest national security failure since 9/11. That just scared the hell out of everybody.
Almost every day in my South Texas community, I get a text from some sheriff about another bailout, another stash house found where young men and women are abused, another fentanyl seizure. Today, the text came from my son's school, and this is what it said. The sheriff's office notified the campus of reports of legal aliens in the area who may be armed and dangerous. This is happening in the communities in our United States because this secretary refuses to do his job and protect the communities in this country.
Last week, President Biden visited my district. He visited the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. And when he was asked, well, while you're here to this border state of Arizona, are you going to visit the border? He said, oh, no, I have more important things to do.
He has served as this administration's chief architect of their open border policies. Literally, it's not hyperbolic to say the next sleeper cell could be in the United States planning the next terrorist attack, and we would have absolutely no idea. And that is in part because of Secretary Mayorkas' complete abdication of his constitutional responsibilities.
Americans sleeping on the streets and all these illegal entries into the country. Take care of your own first.
Think that they're experts in sexuality education because they've had kids. With all due respect, just because you had kids does not mean that you are a sexuality education expert. It does not mean you are an expert in sex. It does not mean you are an expert in the body. It does not mean you are an expert in gender. It does not mean you are an expert in relationships. So the same way that we're sending our kids to school to learn these skills, these life skills like math and quadratic equations and calculus and whatever else from a professional, we also need to be ensuring that our students are learning information about their health, about identity, about very complex issues from a professional.
Yes. This takes me back to education classes where I had to supposedly make the argument that teaching makes you a professional. Guess what I didn't write about? How teaching is professional, because she just explained in all of her lovely words how being a teacher does not make you a professional, and it does not make you an expert because you have a 4-year degree from a university that probably took you 6 years to get that, and all you learned about was equity and inclusivity and all of the other nonsense. But hey, we're not done. It doesn't stop there. We continue to find more and more examples of teachers turning their classrooms into places where all they do is promote rainbow sexuality and a laundry list of the pronouns. So if you haven't figured it out, teachers are now going out of their way to favor the LGBT kids and promote the agenda. And apparently, since they are teachers, they can do whatever they want in the classroom, even in Texas.
Hey, Miss Reed back here, Texas teacher with tip number 2 for creating safe and welcoming places for your LGBTQIA+ students. Remember that yesterday we talked about having the incorporation of a pride flag or pin or something in your classroom so that your students can see that you are supportive of their identities. Tip number 2 today is that you may want to share your pronouns with your students. And when you do that, that opens up that line of communication to let those students who may have pronouns that are different than what is on
Another
the
reason
school
to
roster
ban
to come to you and share their
this
pronouns
app,
with you and share their name with you if it
this
does not match
social
with what
media
is on the
site.
school roster. I highly suggest doing that. It's something as simple as
When we only look at Christians, almost half of them say they think so. Only about 30% of believers of other religions, such as Muslims and Buddhists, say the same, and less than 10% of atheists say they think the end is near. Delano Squires is a research fellow of life, religion, and family at the Heritage Foundation. He tells NTD many people think we're living in the end times because they see a rapid moral decline in society and moving away from traditional values.
We see adults who want to expose children to sexual content in schools and in libraries and in public venues. We see the government promoting this type of behavior. We see the government promoting the castration and mutilation of children in the name of healthcare.
To him, the traditional family of husband and wife is the most important step to move in the right direction. But promoting that norm is seen as not inclusive. People have to walk a thin line to uphold tradition while avoiding hurting others.
I think a big part of it is going to require conservatives who speak with moral clarity and have embraced the courage of their convictions, right? You can't, certain things we just have to go through. You can't avoid them. You can't hide from them. You can't go around them or above or beneath. We have to go straight through.
He says it's evident that the way we're living right now isn't working.
What we're doing now is clearly not working, right? Who would look at our society now and say that people who have the most advanced technology that's ever been created in the history of the world, who have every material comfort in a country where even many low-income people throw out food on a nightly basis, who would say that we as a society, that we're more content, that we're happier, we're more at peace, we exhibit more joy than our ancestors did, a generation ago?
The pandemic and high inflation have led to general uncertainty, which some say is another factor in the high number of people who think the end is near. Reporting by Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Reports say Goldman Sachs is planning to cut up to 8% of its workforce early next year. That means around 4,000 employees would be affected. The company is said to be considering layoffs as part of a slew of cost-cutting measures. And let's end with something positive. There's good news as you head out to the holiday shop this weekend because the pain at the pump is getting more bearable. The national average cost for regular is $3.18 a gallon. That's 13 cents cheaper than a week ago and 56 cents less than a month ago. That's business. I'm Lydia Hu.
Last week, but we still have Karl Marx's birthday.
Need a January 6th. He writes about all three in his new book, So Help Me God. Here's CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody.
The Museum of the Bible seemed a perfect venue to sit down with Mike Pence in his new bestseller, So Help Me God. The former vice president puts his faith as the cornerstone of his life's journey.
The Bible says, remember the rock from which you were hewn. And in writing this book, I really tried to take people back to where it all began for me. And then my journey, of course, coming to my personal decision to put my faith in Jesus Christ.
And he's relied on his faith ever since, through both pain in early political losses and uncertainty, such as waiting on the Lord after infertility issues in his marriage. That's why the Pences have kept a specific Bible passage above the mantle in each home they've lived.
For us, that verse, Jeremiah 29:11, became a lodestar because it was a place that we could ground in the faith that while our plans had been different early on, and we'd run into some bumps in the road and disappointments that, as the Bible says, God tells us, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, give you hope and a future.
His future did become bright, rising all the way to vice president.
And then the Constitution of the United States.
Beside President Donald Trump. It looked like a MAGA match made in heaven. Then came January 6th. Pence writes about those dark days in the book. He details how, despite calls for him to step in and send electors back to the states, he knew he could never do that.
From very early on, when this theory of my role began to emerge, as a student of the American founding, it just made no sense to me whatsoever. There's no provision in the Constitution, and there's no provision in the Electoral Count Act for returning votes to states. It was never contemplated.
He does believe, however, that the January 6th committee failed in thoroughly investigating the events of that day. For example, what about reports of FBI informants being in the crowd that day?
Do you think they had any part of an incitement on that day? Do you think it should be investigated?
Well, I think the fact that the January 6th committee was entirely appointed by the Democrat Speaker of the House was a missed opportunity for the country. I thought the opportunity here to really look at what occurred that day in the broadest possible sweep would have been welcome, to do that above politics.
On a personal level, though, the major disappointment for Pence is what happened to his relationship with Donald Trump. The former president's demands for Pence to act that day made him a target.
I was angry that day at the president and the days that followed.
The electric bill and the rent, but trying to give their kids a decent Christmas.
It's been the theme across the U.S. for charitable giving this holiday season, with both the Salvation Army and the Marine Corps' Toys for Tots issuing urgent calls for donations and volunteers.
As you can see, we are desperately empty.
DC's Central Union Mission took to social media, noting on Wednesday that half of the 1,000 kids who had signed up for Christmas gifts still had yet to be sponsored. It was a call to action, and the community responded in a big way. In just 2 days, a room that was largely empty has filled. Now, there are still children who need their wish list sponsored. For ways to help, you can head to missiondc.org. Reporting in Washington, Alexandra Hoff, Fox News.
It is the second most important.
Get through, so she tried FaceTime. Moments later, Callie's face popped up to her mother's relief.
Right now, we're just really uncertain about what's going to happen.
Anna says the hotel they're staying at near Cusco is rationing hot water as most roads remain impassable.
We had to cross 40 plus barricades. Some were 3 feet tall. They had boulders all over the street and down trees to block the roads.
At least 6 people have died in the political protests. It's not clear when the Ackworth couple will be able to get back home.
Very tired and concerned, and I just really want to get home.
Rob DiRienzo, Fox 5 News.